What happens when the people you trust with your life at 35,000 feet decide you aren't worthy of respect? A black couple sits in an exclusive airport lounge, quietly minding their own business. When the flight crew for their plane arrives, the couple becomes the target of cruel jokes and racist whispers. The crew laughs, believing the couple doesn't belong. They have no idea that the two people they are mocking are not just passengers. They are the high-level FAA inspectors assigned to audit their flight today. And they are watching everything. The Horizon Club at New York's JFK International Airport was a cathedral of manufactured calm. Tucked away in Terminal 4, it was a world of brushed steel, hushed conversations, and the clinking of expensive glassware. It was 6 p.m. on a Tuesday, and the lounge was filling with the evening rush of transatlantic travelers, bankers in rumpled suits, tech bros in expensive hoodies, and families enjoying the last moments of a first-class vacation. In a quiet corner, near a floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the rainy tarmac, sat Marcus Washington and Amara Thorne. To the casual observer, they were just another well-dressed couple. Marcus, in his late 40s, wore dark jeans, a crisp white shirt, and a tailored navy blazer. He had an air of stillness about him, the kind of deep, observant calm that comes from a life of high-stakes work. He nursed a black coffee, his eyes methodically scanning the room. Amara, a decade younger, was electric where he was grounded. She wore a simple black turtleneck and slacks, her hair pulled back in a professional bun. She was scrolling through a document on her phone, but her attention wasn't really on the screen. She was listening. They were not on vacation. They were not new money. They were, in fact, two of the most senior safety inspectors for the Federal Aviation Administration's White Glove Audit Program. Marcus was ex-Air Force, a specialist in avionics and flight operations. Amara was a leading expert in human factors, the psychology of cabin safety, crew resource management, and emergency response. Their job was to blend in. They flew unannounced as full-fare passengers to observe airlines in their natural, unguarded state. They weren't there to check if the seatbelts clicked. They were there to see if the entire system of safety was sound. And tonight, their target was Global Vista Air, Flight 719, non-stop from JFK to London Heathrow. The heavy glass door of the lounge hissed open, and the atmosphere shifted. In walked the crew for Flight 719. They weren't in uniform yet, but they wore their status like one. Leading them was a sharp-featured woman in her 50s, with bleached blonde hair and a palpable air of entitlement. This was Brenda Jennings, the lead flight attendant, a 25-year veteran who saw the cabin as her personal kingdom. Behind her was First Officer Chad Larson, young, arrogant, with a pilot's chronograph on his wrist that he made sure everyone saw. He was laughing loudly at something on his phone. Flanking them were two junior flight attendants, Sarah and Tom, who looked nervous and eager to please. The crew claimed a large circular booth in the center of the lounge, tossing their rollerboards down with a proprietary clatter. They were loud, a stark violation of the lounge's unwritten rules. Marcus and Amara, trained to be invisible, became more so. They were just two more faces in the crowd. Brenda leaned back, kicking her feet up onto the opposite seat. "I swear," she announced, "if one more person asks me for a gluten-free, soy-free, nut-free meal, I'm going to scream. Just eat the chicken, people." Chad chuckled. "At least you get the chicken. Miller," he meant Captain Miller, the flight's commander, "is probably already halfway through his pre-flight nap. Guy doesn't care what we do as long as we push back on time." Amara's fingers tensed on her phone. She and Marcus shared a look. Crew resource management failing. A first officer publicly disparaging his captain was a massive red flag. It spoke to a breakdown in cockpit discipline. Brenda flagged down a waitress, snapping her fingers. "Another round, and make mine a double. This London run is a bore." Her eyes swept the room, dismissive and sharp. They landed on Marcus and Amara. Marcus was reading The Economist. Amara was sipping her water. Brenda stared for a moment, too long. She leaned in toward Chad, her voice a stage whisper designed to carry. "Ugh, look at that," she muttered, gesturing with her chin. Since when did they start letting just anyone in the Horizon Club? Must have gotten a one-day pass with a new credit card. Chad looked over. He smirked. Seriously, they look like they're heading for coach. Probably just here for the free snacks before they get shuffled back to row 40. The junior flight attendant, Sarah, glanced over and looked away quickly, her cheeks coloring. Tom, the other junior, offered a weak, sycophantic laugh. Marcus slowly turned a page in his magazine. He didn't look up. Amara took a slow, deliberate sip of her water. Their professional training was absolute. Do not engage. Observe. Document. But this was different. This wasn't just unprofessional. It was personal. Brenda, emboldened by their lack of reaction, pushed further. She was bored and looking for sport. "I bet they're on our flight," she said, louder this time. "They're probably the ones who pre-ordered the vegan meal and will complain about it. I can just tell. Probably trying to get a free upgrade by complaining," Chad added, checking his reflection in his phone. "It's always the ones who look like that who try the hardest." Marcus closed his magazine. He placed it neatly on the table. Amara set her phone down, screen down. They didn't look at the crew. They looked at each other. The audit, Marcus knew, had just taken on a new, critical dimension. When a crew is sloppy with their professionalism in public, they are almost certainly sloppy with their safety duties in private. But now, Amara's human factors specialty was at the forefront. What happens when a crew's personal prejudice, their overt, blatant racism, is introduced into a high-stress environment? It was a question they taught in textbooks. Tonight, it looked like they were about to see the answer in real time. "Let's get another coffee, Amara," Marcus said, his voice perfectly level. "It's going to be a long flight." As they stood, they had to walk past the crew's booth. Marcus walked first. Amara followed. As she passed, Brenda Jennings, in a moment of juvenile, calculated spite, stuck her designer shoe out slightly. Amara, focused and professional, didn't see it. She clipped her foot on Brenda's heel, stumbling forward and catching herself on the back of a chair. The crew, all except Sarah, burst into laughter. "Oh my goodness!" Brenda fake gasped, her eyes wide with mock innocence. "Watch your step, honey. These expensive floors are... well, they can be tricky for some people." Amara stood up straight. Her eyes were like polished steel. She looked directly at Brenda, who was still smirking. The entire lounge section had gone quiet, all eyes on the confrontation. Marcus turned, his face unreadable. He offered his hand to Amara. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine, Marcus." Chad leaned forward, his voice dripping with condescension. "Hey folks, no hard feelings. You'd better hurry though. I think I just heard the final boarding call for Atlanta. You know, on that other airline." He winked. The implication was clear. You don't belong here. You belong on a budget carrier. Marcus met Chad's gaze. He held it for 3 full seconds. He said nothing. The silence was heavier than any shout. Then he and Amara turned and walked, with perfect unhurried posture, towards the coffee bar. "God," Chad scoffed, his voice returning to its normal volume. "So entitled, can't even take a joke." Brenda watched them go, her lip curled in a sneer. "Well, that's the last we'll see of them. Let's finish up. Time to go to work." In the corner, Marcus handed Amara a fresh bottle of water. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice low. I'm documenting, Amara said, her voice tight. Brenda Jennings, lead FA. Chad Larson, first officer. Hostile, discriminatory, and unprofessional conduct. Created a trip hazard. Publicly disparaged passengers. Good, Marcus said, taking a sip of his coffee. This audit is now code red. We're not just watching for procedure. We're watching for malice. They think we're a joke, Amara said, her anger a cold, hard knot in her stomach. Yes, they do, Marcus replied, looking out the window as a Global Vista 787 Dreamliner taxied toward the gate. And that's exactly why they are going to fail. The boarding call for Global Vista, Flight 719 to London Heathrow, echoed through the terminal. The crew, now in their crisp, navy blue uniforms, strode past the gate, Brenda leading the way. They disappeared down the jet bridge, ready to assume their roles. A few minutes later, the gate agent called for first-class boarding. Marcus and Amara stood. They gathered their carry-on bags, standard-issue rollers that held their clothes on one side and their inspection equipment and secure laptops on the other. They walked past the crew's empty, messy booth in the lounge and headed to the gate. Mr. Washington? Ms. Thorne? The gate agent, a polite young man named David, smiled brightly. Right this way. We'll get you settled in. He scanned their boarding passes. Beep, beep. Enjoy your flight, sir, ma'am. You're in 1A and 1B, right at the front. Marcus and Amara stepped onto the jet bridge. As they rounded the corner into the aircraft's galley, they were met by the crew. Brenda Jennings was standing there, holding a tray of pre-departure drinks, champagne and orange juice, with a plastic, welcoming smile plastered on her face. It was the mask of service Amara had written a paper on. When Brenda saw who was walking in, the same two people from the lounge, her smile didn't just fade, it inverted. Her eyes went wide, then narrowed into slits of pure, unadulterated shock, followed by a wave of visible anger. Chad Larson, standing in the cockpit doorway, saw them. He choked on a sip of water, his face turning red. Marcus simply looked at Brenda. Good evening. Amara followed. Good evening. Brenda was so stunned she couldn't speak. She just stood there, her mouth slightly open, blocking the aisle. The passengers behind Marcus and Amara were starting to bunch up. Ma'am, Marcus said gently. May we get to our seats? Brenda's face snapped back to its default sneer. She thought, in that split second, they must be bloggers, or they scammed their way in. They bought a cheap upgrade and think they're royalty. She stepped aside, her movement rigid, and retracted the tray of drinks as Amara passed. Right this way, she said, her voice dripping with ice. Marcus and Amara settled into 1A and 1B, the bulkhead throne seats, the most desirable on the plane. They stowed their bags, the picture of practiced, efficient travelers. Brenda watched them, her mind racing. This was her cabin. She would not let these people ruin her flight. She turned to the junior FA, Tom. You handle this row, she hissed, quiet enough for only him to hear. I don't want to deal with them. And don't go out of your way. You understand me? Tom, young and impressionable, nodded quickly. Yes, Brenda. The boarding process continued. Marcus and Amara began their silent, secondary audit. From his seat, Marcus had a clear view of the forward galley and the cockpit door. Amara, from hers, could observe the main cabin door and the flight attendant station. Amara pulled out a slim, black, hard-bound notebook. It looked like a personal journal. To the crew, it might look like she was a writer or just a fussy passenger. Brenda, walking by, saw it and rolled her eyes. Probably writing a complaint already, she muttered to Chad, who was now seated in the cockpit. Let her. It'll go straight in the trash. But in that notebook, Amara was making notes in a coded shorthand she and Marcus had developed. 1845. L1 door, lead FA, Jennings, failed to check emergency assist strap. 1847. FRWD galley, FA, Tom, did not physically verify seals on medkit box, watched Jennings pencil whip the checklist. Marcus was making his own mental notes. The cockpit door was open. Captain Miller and First Officer Larson were having a loud, non-essential conversation. He could hear Chad laughing about a football game. This was a violation of the sterile cockpit principle, which was supposed to be in effect during all ground operations. They weren't focused on pre-flight. Brenda, deciding to reassert her dominance, took over the first-class pre-departure service herself, pointedly skipping Marcus and Amara. She offered drinks to the passenger in 1D, then 2A, then 2B, walking past them twice without a word. Finally, Marcus used the call button. It chimed. Brenda ignored it. It chimed again. With a dramatic put-upon sigh, she stomped over. "Yes," she snapped. "Good evening," Marcus said, his voice as smooth as glass. "My partner and I would love a pre-departure drink. Water would be fine." Brenda's smile was pure acid. "We are so sorry. We've already collected the glassware for departure. We're just too busy. You'll have to wait until we're in the air." This was a blatant lie. She was holding a tray with 2 fresh glasses of champagne. "I see," Marcus said. He looked at the tray. He looked back at her. "Very well." He pressed the call button again. This time, the junior FA, Sarah, ran over, her face pale. "Yes, sir. Can I help you?" "Yes," Amara said, giving the young woman a small, kind smile. "My colleague and I would just like 2 bottles of water. Please, when you have a moment." Sarah, not yet poisoned by Brenda's toxicity, just saw 2 passengers. "Of course, right away." She dashed to the galley. Brenda grabbed her by the arm. "What did I tell you? I handle them, and they can wait." "But they just wanted water," Sarah stammered. "And I said they can wait." Before Sarah could respond, Amara was standing in the galley entrance. She was not supposed to be up, but she did it anyway. "Excuse me," Amara said. "Is there a problem?" Brenda whirled around, her face a mask of fury. "Ma'am, you must return to your seat. The main cabin door is about to close. You are a safety hazard." "I am currently a passenger in your care, Ms. Jennings," Amara said, her voice low and sharp. "And your conduct, from the lounge to this moment, has been noted. We asked for water. Is that going to be a problem for you to provide?" The entire galley went silent. Chad, who had poked his head out of the cockpit again, watched with a smirk. He loved when Brenda put problem passengers in their place. Brenda, realizing she was being challenged, went for the kill. She leaned in, her voice a venomous whisper. "I don't know who you think you are. You waltz in here, flashing a first-class ticket you probably got from some diversity lottery, and think you own the plane. This is my aircraft. You will sit down, you will shut up, and I will bring you your water when I am good and ready. Or I can have you and your friend removed from this flight right now for interfering with a flight crew. Your choice." It was the nuclear option, a direct threat. Amara held her gaze. The mask was completely off. This was no longer just prejudice. It was abuse of power. "I see," Amara said, her voice deathly quiet. "Thank you for clarifying your position, Ms. Jennings." She turned, returned to her seat, and buckled in. Marcus looked at her. "Code red?" "Code black," Amara replied, clicking her pen. "She just threatened a federal officer. She just doesn't know it yet." The door closed. The safety video began to play. Brenda, fuming, performed the safety demonstration with all the enthusiasm of a coroner. When she came to the part about passengers who may need assistance, She stared directly at Marcus and Amara. The plane pushed back from the gate. The 787 Dreamliner tore a hole in the night sky, climbing past the turbulence of the lower atmosphere into the smooth, cold dark of 36,000 feet. The fasten seatbelt sign pinged off. In the cabin, the performative dance of service began. In the front galley, however, the performance was over. "I cannot believe them," Brenda seethed, ripping open a bag of almonds. "In my cabin. The nerve." "Just ignore them." Chad's voice crackled over the intercom from the cockpit. He was on the private crew channel. "Give them 0 service. Who are they going to complain to? Us? Miller's already asleep." "He's asleep," Brenda said, shocked. "We're not even at cruise." He's old. Told me to wake him over Greenland. Anyway, have fun. Don't let those two bother you." In her notebook, Amara wrote, 19:30 UTC, Captain or Miller sleeping post-climb, F.O. Larson encouraging service non-compliance, gross CRM failure. This was bad. Very, very bad. The captain was the ultimate authority, and he had already abdicated it to a toxic lead FA and an arrogant first officer. The meal service began. Brenda herself, with a smile that was all teeth, came to their row. "And for you too?" she asked, not even looking at them. "We have the beef short rib, the seared halibut, or the pasta." "I'll have the halibut," Amara said. "And I'll have the short rib," Marcus added. Brenda said, tapping her tablet. "Oh, that is such a shame. It seems we're all out of both. We only have the vegan pasta left. I'm sure you'll love it." She knew what she was doing. It was a callback to her comment in the lounge. "I bet they're the ones who pre-ordered the vegan meal." Marcus didn't blink. "The pasta will be fine, thank you." "And for you?" she said to Amara. "The pasta is fine," Amara said, her eyes boring into Brenda's. "Wonderful." Brenda beamed and walked away. 10 minutes later, Tom brought their trays. The passengers around them, in 1D, 2A, 2D, were all eating the short rib and the halibut. The shortage was a targeted lie. The pasta was cold, congealed, barely edible. Marcus and Amara each ate 1 bite for posterity. Then they put their forks down. They didn't complain. They didn't ask for something else. They simply observed. This was the human factors test in action. Brenda, so consumed by her petty, racist vendetta, was failing to see the bigger picture. She was so focused on punishing them that she was becoming sloppy. Marcus watched as she and Tom cleared the service. A passenger in 2D, a businessman, asked for a second glass of wine. "Certainly, sir," Brenda cooed, refilling his glass to the brim. She did the same for the woman in 2A and the man in 3D. But then she didn't stop. She left the half-empty bottle of red wine on the man's armrest. "Just in case you need a top-up, sweetie," she purred. Marcus's eyebrows shot up. This wasn't just bad service. It was a major FAA violation. A large, unsecured glass bottle in the cabin? In even moderate turbulence, that bottle would become a projectile. It was a missile. Amara, seeing it from her angle, made another note. 2015 UTC. Led F.A. Jennings. Left 750 ml glass bottle unsecured on passenger armrest. Violation 14. CFR 121.5577. They were compiling a case so airtight that no union representative, no airline lawyer, could possibly argue it, and the crew was handing it to them on a silver platter. 2 hours into the flight, the cabin lights dimmed. Most passengers were asleep or watching movies. This was when the real work often began. Marcus unbuckled. He stood up, stretched, and began a slow walk back toward the economy cabin. This was part of the audit. He needed to check the mid and aft galleys, observe the rest of the crew, and check the emergency exits. As he passed the forward galley, Brenda and Tom were inside, curtains drawn. He heard Brenda's voice. And that's why you always check the departure box, even if you don't. It's just paperwork. Nobody ever looks. It saves 10 minutes. Marcus paused. He was stretching. He heard Tom. But what about the emergency light check? Oh, please, does it matter? If we crash, we crash. A little light isn't going to help. Just check the box. Now go, I want to rest. Marcus's blood ran cold. This was not just laziness. This was willful, systemic negligence. He continued his walk. Amara, meanwhile, unbuckled and went to the forward lavatory. On her way, she accidentally brushed against the forward jump seat, where the junior FA Sarah was sitting, reading a magazine. "Oh, excuse me," Amara said. No, you're fine," Sarah said, looking up. She seemed nervous. "Long flight," Amara said, offering a small smile. "The longest," Sarah agreed, sighing. "Is it always like this?" Amara asked, her voice quiet, conspiratorial. Sarah's eyes flickered toward the galley curtain, where Brenda was. "Like what?" "So tense." Sarah's face crumpled for a second. She's an icon, a legend, but she's tough. She doesn't like surprises or new people." "I see," Amara said. "Well, you seem to be doing a great job." "Thanks," Sarah whispered. "Honestly, I'm really sorry about before, in the lounge, and with the water. That wasn't right." There it is, Amara thought. The dissenter. In every failed crew, there was almost always one person who knew things were wrong. "We all have a job to do, Sarah," Amara said, her voice kind but firm. "The most important thing is to do it right, no matter who is watching." She went into the lavatory. It was clean, but she did a quick, practiced check. She pulled on the assist bar, she checked under the sink, and she checked the smoke detector. It was stuffed with a damp paper towel. A passenger, or more likely, a crew member, had disabled it so they could smoke a cigarette or a vape. Amara took a picture with her phone. This was a federal crime. She came out, her face a mask of stone. She returned to her seat just as Marcus was returning from his walk. They made eye contact. He gave a tiny, almost imperceptible shake of his head. "It's bad back there, too." She nodded grimly. "It's worse up here." They were over the black, icy waters of the North Atlantic. There was no one to turn to. They were in a pressurized tube, flying at 600 miles per hour, under the command of a crew that was discriminatory, negligent, and, as Amara had just discovered, potentially criminal. The hard karma they were here to deliver was no longer about punishing racism. It was about saving the lives of the 200 other people on the plane. The flight droned on. Marcus and Amara tried to get some rest, but they were too wired. They were auditors on a live fire exercise. Every creak of the fuselage, every chime of the call bell, set them on edge. The first sign of trouble was subtle. A smell. Amara, with her human factors training, was acutely sensitive to environmental changes. It was a faint, acrid smell, like burning plastic. She sat up. She looked at Marcus. He smelled it too. It was coming from the galley. At that exact moment, the call bell chimed from the economy cabin. It wasn't just one chime. It was the triple chime, the emergency call. Brenda, who had been dozing on her jump seat, startled awake. She looked annoyed. "Now what?" she muttered. The intercom crackled. It was Sarah from the aft galley. Her voice was high-pitched, panicked. "Brenda, we have a passenger. Mrs. Petrov in 32C. She can't breathe. I think it's an allergy." Her son said she ate some of the cashews. "She's allergic to nuts." "It was a nut-free flight," Brenda snapped into the phone. She said she brought her own snack, and it must have been cross-contaminated. "Brenda, it's bad. Her face is swelling." This was a grade A medical emergency. Brenda sighed, a sound of profound inconvenience. Ugh, fine. I'll get the kit. She unbuckled and went into the galley. Amara watched her. Brenda fumbled with the latch on the main medical kit box. She pulled on it, but it wouldn't open. It was the new model, the one she'd pencil-whipped the check on. She clearly didn't know how to open it. Stupid. Cheap. Box, she hissed, smacking it. Ma'am, Amara said, unbuckling. Do you need help? I told you to sit down, Brenda shrieked. This is a crew matter. She's in anaphylaxis, Amara said, her voice rising, shedding all pretense of being a passenger. She has maybe 3 minutes. Where is the EpiPen? It's in the kit. There's a secondary fast response kit with an EpiPen in the jump seat compartment. It's regulation, Amara said. Brenda just stared at her blankly. What? No, there isn't. It's in the box. Amara pushed past her. Move. She ran to the jump seat, opened the compartment under it, and pulled out a small red pouch. Inside, 2 EpiPens, aspirin, and basic first aid. Just as she pulled it out, the plane lurched. It wasn't turbulence. It was a single, violent jolt that threw Amara against the bulkhead. The acrid smell of burning plastic intensified, and a thin wisp of smoke curled out from under the galley floor. An alarm, a high-pitched beep, started to sound. It was the galley fire detector. Brenda screamed, a real, terrified scream. In the cockpit, Chad, who had been bored, suddenly sat bolt upright. What was that? The beep, beep, beep was now audible. A red light flashed on their panel. FWD galley smoke. Fire! Chad yelled. Captain, wake up! Fire! Captain Miller shot up from his reclined seat, disoriented. What? Where? In the cabin, chaos erupted. The jolt had sent the unsecured wine bottle from row 3 flying. It shattered against the bulkhead, spraying glass and red wine everywhere. Passengers were waking up, yelling. Brenda was frozen, paralyzed by the smoke, the alarm, and the screaming passengers. She was, in FAA terms, non-mission capable. Amara looked at the wisp of smoke. It was an electrical fire. Brenda! Amara yelled, grabbing her shoulders. Get the BCF, the extinguisher, now! Brenda just stared, her eyes wide with panic. Marcus was already out of his seat. Amara, the passenger! I'll handle the fire! He grabbed the small BCF extinguisher from its holder, the one he'd mentally noted the location of hours ago. He knelt, pulled the pin, and aimed it at the source of the smoke, a small electrical panel for the water heater. He discharged a short, controlled burst. Amara, meanwhile, was running. She sprinted down the aisle, EpiPen in hand, toward row 32. Out of my way! She yelled. Move! Passengers, seeing the authority in her face, flattened themselves against their seats. She got to 32C. Mrs. Petrov was blue. Her eyes were rolled back. Her son was sobbing. Mom, Mom, please! Is this her? Amara yelled. Yes, she's allergic. I don't know. I've got this, Amara said. She ripped the cap off the EpiPen. I'm trained. I'm going to inject her in the thigh. Hold her. She jabbed the pen hard into the woman's leg, holding it for the required 5 seconds. Back in the forward galley, the cockpit door flew open. First Officer Chad Larson stumbled out, his eyes wild. What's going on? I see smoke. Is it a fire? He had just committed the single most dangerous violation a pilot can make. He had abandoned the cockpit during an active, unfolding emergency, leaving a disoriented, just-woken-up captain alone at the controls. He had broken the fortress of the flight deck. Marcus, having just discharged the extinguisher, stood up. The smoke was already dissipating. It was a small short, likely in the water heater wiring. He looked at Chad. His voice was no longer that of a passenger. It was the voice of a federal inspector who had just witnessed the ultimate sin. First Officer Larson, Marcus said, his voice resin running like a steel bar. You just abandoned the flight deck. You violated Title 14 of the Code of Federal Regulations, Section 121 or Sot. 44542. You will return to the cockpit immediately. You will secure that door, and you will not come out again until we are on the ground. Do you understand me? Chad froze. All the arrogance, all the smirking, evaporated. He was looking at a man who had just quoted federal law from memory. Who the hell are you? Chad stammered. I am the last man on this aircraft you wanted to see tonight, Marcus said. Now, get back in the cockpit. Chad, his face ashen, scrambled back into the cockpit and slammed the door. Brenda, who had witnessed the entire exchange, was hyperventilating. She was leaning against the galley wall, her entire career flashing before her eyes. She looked at Marcus, then at the fire extinguisher in his hand, then at the broken wine bottle on the floor. She had failed, on every conceivable level. Just then, Amara came walking back up the aisle. She looked calm. Medical emergency is stable, she reported to Marcus, as if he were her partner, which he was. EpiPen administered. Passenger is conscious and breathing. Vitals are improving. I've instructed the aft crew to monitor her and prepare for a medical meet on arrival. She then looked at Brenda. I also found this, she said, holding up the damp paper towel from the lavatory. Disabled smoke detector. A federal offense. Brenda Jennings slid down the galley wall and sat on the floor, her face in her hands. The hard karma wasn't something that was coming. It was here. It had just saved 200 lives. The remaining 3 hours of the flight were the quietest, most terrifying hours of Brenda Jennings's life. The plane was fine. The small electrical fire was out. The passenger, Mrs. Petroff, was stable. The real emergency was the one unfolding in the minds of the crew. After Chad had scrambled back into the cockpit, a new voice came over the intercom. Captain Miller. He was awake now, and he sounded furious. "This is the captain," he announced, his voice tight with anger. "We experienced a minor electrical short in the forward galley, which has been resolved. We also had a medical situation, which has been handled. We are continuing to London Heathrow with no further issues. Flight attendants, secure the forward galley and report." Marcus, still standing, looked at Brenda, who was still on the floor. "Get up, Miss Jennings," Marcus said, his voice flat. "He's talking to you." Brenda, on trembling legs, stood. I clean up this glass," Marcus ordered, pointing to the shattered wine bottle. "And secure your galley. We are still in flight." Tom and Sarah, who had heard the commotion, ran up. They saw Brenda's face, the extinguisher residue, and Marcus, who was now radiating an authority they couldn't place but couldn't deny. "Tom, Sarah," Marcus said, "get a dustpan and a blanket for the glass. Now." They jumped, as if he were their training supervisor. Brenda, humiliated, just watched as the junior crew she'd bullied all night cleaned up her mess. Amara sat back in 1B. She opened her notebook. She was no longer hiding it. She wrote in clear, concise script a full after-action report of the entire incident. 2210 UTC, FWD galley smoke detector activation. 2210 UTC, simultaneous L3 call bell, anaphylaxis event. 2211 UTC, lead FA, Jennings, failed to locate deploy medkit. Passenger, Thorne, retrieved secondary kit. 2212 UTC, electrical fire, FWD galley. Lead FA, Jennings froze, non-mission capable. 22.12 UTC, passenger, Washington, retrieved, discharged BCF, extinguishing fire. 22.13 UTC, First Officer, Larson, abandoned flight deck, violating sterile cockpit. 22:13 UTC, passenger, Washington, ordered FO to return to duty. 22:14 UTC, Passenger Thorne administered EpiPen, stabilized medical emergency. Summary: total breakdown of CRM. Lead FA failure. FO failure. Safety procedures performed by passengers. It was the most damning report she had ever written. The rest of the flight, Brenda, Tom, and Sarah did not return to the first-class cabin. They hid in the galley, the curtain drawn. The only person who moved was Marcus, who went back to check on Mrs. Petrov himself, introducing himself as a concerned passenger and ensuring she was comfortable. As the coast of Ireland appeared on the moving map, signaling their approach, Amara looked over at Marcus. "The lounge," she said quietly. "It wasn't just them being racist, Marcus. It was a symptom. It always is," he replied. "The arrogance it takes to mock a stranger in public is the same arrogance it takes to pencil whip a safety check. The entitlement to believe you belong and they don't is the same entitlement that makes you think the rules don't apply to you." "She thought we were nothing," Amara said, flexing her hands, the adrenaline finally fading. "And because she thought we were nothing, she got sloppy. She got distracted. She wasn't focused on her job. She was focused on us." "That," Marcus said, "is the very definition of a human factors failure, and it's going to be the centerpiece of our report." The fasten seatbelt sign chimed for the final descent. Brenda Jennings had to emerge. It was the law. She had to sit in her jump seat for landing. She walked out of the galley, her face a pale, waxy mask. She wouldn't make eye contact with Marcus or Amara. She strapped herself into the jump seat, facing them, her eyes fixed on a spot on the bulkhead. She looked like a woman on her way to her own execution. The plane touched down at London Heathrow with a gentle bump. As it taxied to the gate, a flurry of activity happened outside. "Look," Marcus said, motioning out the window. There wasn't just a jet bridge. There were 2 sets of medical paramedics, a fire crew, standard for any in-flight fire report, and most tellingly, 3 stern-looking officials in suits. "They're here," Amara said. Captain Miller, having been informed by Chad of the full, horrifying picture, had clearly radioed ahead and reported passenger interference, trying to spin the story. He had inadvertently called his own executioners. The plane stopped. The thunk of the jet bridge connecting sounded. The fasten seatbelt sign went off. "Ladies and gentlemen," Brenda said, her voice a recorded monotone, "welcome to London Heathrow. We ask that you remain seated until—" "Brenda!" Captain Miller's voice boomed from the cockpit. He threw the door open, his face purple with rage. He had decided on his strategy. Attack. "You two!" he roared, pointing at Marcus and Amara. "Do not move. I have alerted airport security. You are being detained for interfering with a flight crew, assaulting a flight attendant, and—" His voice trailed off. Because Marcus and Amara had not reached for their bags. They had reached into their blazers. They stood up, blocking the aisle. Marcus held up his credentials. The gold badge, the official photo, the bold, unmistakable words: United States Government, Federal Aviation Administration, Safety Inspector, Marcus Washington. Amara did the same. Federal Aviation Administration, Cabin Safety Specialist, Amara Thorne. The silence in the first-class cabin was absolute. Every passenger who had been about to stand up froze. Captain Miller's face went from purple to red to a sickly, mottled white. His jaw dropped open. Brenda Jennings let out a small, strangled sound like a dying animal. Chad, peeking from behind Miller, looked like he was going to faint. "Captain Miller," Marcus said, his voice now a formal, official command. "My name is Senior Inspector Marcus Washington. This is Inspector Amara Thorne. We are on a white glove audit of your airline and this flight. As of this moment, 0630 Zulu, this aircraft is grounded. Your entire crew is to be detained pending a full investigation which is already in progress." He looked at Brenda, who was shaking so hard the jump seat was rattling. "Ms. Jennings," Marcus continued, "we observed your conduct, and that of First Officer Larson in the JFK Horizon Club. We observed your racist, discriminatory, and hostile behavior. We observed your willful negligence during pre-flight checks. We observed your targeted service failures. We observed you leave an unsecured glass bottle in the cabin, which became a projectile. We observed your total failure to respond to a medical emergency and your paralysis during an in-flight fire." Amara stepped forward. "We also observed your junior crew disabling a lavatory smoke detector. We observed you create a hostile work environment, and we observed you threatening passengers who were, in fact, saving the lives you had endangered." She looked at Captain Miller. "And you, Captain? We noted your first officer's comments about your pre-flight nap. We noted his repeated, dangerous violations of the sterile cockpit rule. And we just noted you attempting to have 2 federal inspectors arrested for performing their duties." The main cabin door opened. The 3 officials in suits, 2 from the UK's Civil Aviation Authority and 1 from the FAA's London field office, stepped on. "Inspector Washington?" one of them said. "We're here, Jim," Marcus replied. "We have a lot to talk about." He turned back to the crew. He looked at Brenda, his eyes filled not with anger, but with a profound, cold disappointment. "You laughed at us, Miss Jennings," he said, his voice quiet. "You thought we didn't belong. Your prejudice made you blind, and because you were blind, you failed. This is the hard karma you've earned." The fallout was not a storm. It was a nuclear winter. The passengers were deplaned, except for Marcus, Amara, the entire flight crew, and the officials. The paramedics came on, stabilized Mrs. Petrov, and took her to a hospital. Her son, a man named Alex, wouldn't leave without shaking Amara's hand. I don't know who you are," he said, tears in his eyes. "But you saved my mother's life. Brenda, that flight attendant, she was going to let her die." "She's in good hands now," Amara said simply. After the passengers were gone, the aircraft became a crime scene. Captain Miller, Brenda Jennings, Chad Larson, Tom, and Sarah were formally interviewed, interrogated, one by one, right there in the first-class cabin, for the next 9 hours. Marcus and Amara led the questioning, with the CAA and FAA field officers observing. It was a systematic, brutal dismantling of their careers. Brenda's defense crumbled in seconds. When confronted with the lounge comments, she first denied them. "I would never." "We have 3 other passengers from the lounge who've already submitted statements," Amara said, lying. It was a classic interrogation bluff. Brenda's face cracked. It was a joke. It was just locker room talk. It didn't mean anything." "Did pencil whipping the medical kit checklist also mean nothing, Ms. Jennings?" Marcus asked, his voice cutting. "Did you know how to open it?" I was flustered. The alarm went off after Mrs. Petrov's son called. "You were flustered because you were confronted by a passenger, Ms. Thorne, who you had already threatened, and you didn't know your own equipment." "And the wine bottle? And the disabled smoke detector? And the trip hazard in the lounge?" Brenda finally broke. She dissolved into a sobbing, incoherent mess, begging for her job, for her pension. "I've given 25 years to this airline. You can't do this." "You gave 25 years," Amara said, her voice ice-cold. "And in one 6-hour flight, you demonstrated you learned nothing about your primary duty, safety. You were more concerned with putting us in our place than you were with running a safe cabin. That's not a mistake. That's a choice." Chad Larson's interrogation was even shorter. "Mr. Larson, why did you leave the flight deck?" "There was a fire. I was assessing the situation." "Your job is to fly the plane," Marcus said. "Your captain was disoriented. You abandoned your post. You left the aircraft without a fully functional pilot in command during an active fire over the ocean. There is no excuse. There is no explanation. It is the single greatest act of professional malpractice a pilot can commit." When confronted with the lounge comments, Chad just shut down. No comment. "It doesn't matter," Marcus said. "We have your cockpit voice recorder logs. We have your intercom calls. We have your entire flight." Captain Miller, for his part, tried to blame his crew. "I had no idea. Brenda is a senior FA. Chad is a good pilot. I trusted them." "That was your mistake," Marcus countered. "Your job isn't to trust. It's to lead. It's called crew resource management. Your resource management failed. You fostered a culture where a first officer could mock you, where a lead FA could run a campaign of harassment, and where safety checks were optional. The entire system failure on this flight rests, ultimately, with you." By 5:00 p.m. London time, the initial report was filed. The crew was not allowed to check into their hotel. Their company IDs and passports were temporarily seized. They were flown back to New York, in coach, on a different airline, escorted by an FAA official, the next day. They were, in a word, finished. The hard karma came swiftly, and it was devastatingly precise. Brenda Jennings, fired for cause by Global Vista Air before she even landed in New York. The FAA initiated proceedings to permanently revoke her flight attendant certification. The charge sheet included reckless endangerment, gross negligence of safety duties, failure to perform in an emergency, falsifying federal documents, the pre-flight checklist, and conduct unbecoming. She was blacklisted from every major airline in the world. Her 25-year career was over. Her pension was gone. She was last heard of applying for a job at a Starbucks in suburban New Jersey. First Officer Chad Larson, fired immediately. The FAA permanently revoked his commercial pilot's license. The abandoning the flight deck charge was something from which there is no recovery. He would never legally pilot a commercial aircraft again. His arrogance cost him his entire future. Captain Miller. He was offered a choice: be fired for cause or take immediate, forced retirement. He took the retirement. He lost his seniority, his captain status, and all his flight benefits. He left the airline in disgrace, a case study in failed leadership. Tom and Sarah, the junior FAs. This is where Marcus and Amara showed the difference between justice and vengeance. Tom, who had laughed along with Brenda, was suspended for 6 months without pay and forced to retrain from scratch. Sarah, who had shown remorse and had not participated, was given a formal warning and mandatory retraining, but she kept her job. She later provided a key statement against Brenda. Global Vista Air. The airline itself was hit with the largest fine in its history, $2.2 million for systemic safety failures, training gaps, and a documented culture of non-compliance. Marcus and Amara's report, citing the racism in the lounge as the initial domino in a cascade of human factors failure, forced the airline to ground its entire 787 fleet for a week for emergency equipment audits. The stock price tanked, and the CEO was forced to issue a public apology. But the final, hardest piece of karma came from an unexpected place. Mrs. Petrov, the woman Amara had saved, made a full recovery. Her son, Alex Petrov, was not just a concerned son. He was a Pulitzer Prize-nominated investigative journalist for the New York Times. 2 weeks later, a front-page story ran, "Toxic Skies: how prejudice at 35,000 feet nearly led to tragedy. Alex, using his mother's eyewitness account and statements from other first-class passengers, laid out the entire story. The mockery in the lounge, the diversity lottery comments, the refusal of water, the cold pasta, the threats, and then the fire, the medical emergency, and the complete, terrifying failure of the crew. He concluded the article by revealing that the two passengers who had been the target of all this vitriol and who had single-handedly saved the plane were, in fact, FAA safety inspectors. The story was a global humiliation for Global Vista Air. Brenda Jennings and Chad Larson became the faces of racism and incompetence. Their names, their actions, their hard karma were now public record, a permanent monument to their own arrogance. Marcus and Amara, however, were not named. They were, as always, two inspectors, names withheld, who had already moved on to their next flight, their next audit, sitting quietly in a lounge, watching and listening. That is the power of hard karma. It's not always loud, and it's not always immediate. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's just two people, sitting in a lounge, doing their job. The crew of Global Vista 719 thought they were all powerful. They thought their uniforms and their status gave them the right to judge, to mock, and to endanger people who they thought were less than them. But they made one fatal mistake. They forgot that everyone has a job to do, and the most important job, the one we all share, is to treat each other with basic human dignity. Their prejudice wasn't just ugly, it was a distraction that made them fail at their own jobs, with life or death consequences. They didn't just get fired for their racism, they got fired because their racism proved they were unsafe. What do you think of this story? Have you ever seen someone in a position of power abuse it like this? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you believe in hard, real-life karma, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to the channel for more true stories.